In today's video, you're going to learn about senior drivers and driving safety. And in this conversation today, we're going to cover a number of topics, including how to best bring up the subject of driving safety or ability with your senior, some interesting statistics about seniors and driving, and maybe most importantly, how you can get an independent assessment of your senior driver's abilities, capabilities, and not have it reported automatically to the DMV. So let's get to it. All right, so let's jump into it. So Melanie, I want to thank you for agreeing to spend some time with us and talking about the challenges with seniors and driving, how that process kind of goes for many families and the seniors, how to work with seniors to recognize what their driving limitations may be. And it's a very important topic because in the United States, driving is kind of a matter of independence, more so than just a mode of transportation. So I really appreciate you taking time. Let's just start with who you are, doing your introduction, how you got into this business, evaluating seniors and their driving skills.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity. So I'm Melanie Henry, and I am a driving instructor, and I have a background in social welfare, risk assessment, and case management. And I have direct experience. My father had vascular dementia in Australia, and he was still driving, and it was terrifying to me because he was actually one of the few that would be speeding. He didn't drive slow. And there was no kind of assessment, and his physician wouldn't really take any affirmative action with it all. And then I moved to Australia, and then I was working as a private caregiver for many years and really started to see the conflict and the upset and the anger and the worry that families were having, and the driver, parents were still driving, and just this real conflict and no kind of happy medium ground to kind of figure out should they be behind the wheel. And then I moved from there and I took up a position with a local nonprofit here in the Tri-Valley, and I was a coordinator for coordinating rides for older adults here in the Tri-Valley. And many of them were still driving, but many of them could barely get themselves in and out of the volunteer driver's car. Some of them had cognition issues that were starting to show, but they were still behind the wheel. And I was at that point already a driving instructor for a local school, and I thought there's got to be some kind of assessment process that's going to help families and drivers figure out when is the time to hang up the keys. So I started to do some research, and I came across DriveAble's technology and immediately thought, we've got to bring this to the Bay Area. We've, got so many older adults, as we know, it's this booming demographic. And so, I jumped in and set up an assessment center here in the Bay Area, and really happy to help families and help drivers, and really at the end of the day about giving peace of mind and having a baseline of where current functioning is at from a mental point of view. So that's kind of how I got into this.
And what kind of challenges do you see coming from the family, or how do people find you? Why do they find you? And the dynamics you see in families related to driving for seniors.
So I have maybe about 50-50 where I'll have families who live out of town. They've come in to visit their parent, and they've noticed that they've really started to decline. Like maybe they're not showering as often, or not preparing themselves any kind of nutritious meals, and they're just generally physically not moving as well. They don't seem to kind of have the strength and the stamina that they used to have. Or, maybe the parent has fallen twice in the last year. There's some research out that says that there's a higher risk of having a collision if you've had 2 or more falls in the past 12 months. I have other cases where families have, taken care of the parent their parent and brought them home, and they've come out of, a skilled nursing facility, or maybe even just have only gone to urgent care, and maybe they've had a UTI, or, it could be that they've had surgery, that they do have some significant medical issue, and they're starting to see that maybe that's starting to impact just their general activity levels, their general mindset, their approach to life, and they're just not sure if they're still safe to drive. So that's one group of people. And then I'll have other families that will call me after. So that's kind of, some of that's preventative. But then I'll have other families that will call me when mum or dad have already had a collision or had a series of fender benders, or the car is covered in dents and scrapes, or the garage door is damaged, or the mailbox has been taken out, or they're noticing that their parents starting to make comments about, I came home from the grocery store today and everybody was honking at me, and just starting to hear and see some things that are worrisome. So people find me. They find me on Google. They find me hopefully through their physician, but not everybody knows about the services. And or they do a Google search is really the main way, or through the local hospital settings. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Melanie, I do have a question. Do you have services, maybe a network of people that you associate with out of state or in other areas, or is it just the Bay Area that you do this in?
My service, using the Drive Able technology, which is a research development group that's been around for 25 years. They're out of Canada, and I just want to give a little plug for them because they've just reached 150,000 of these cognitive assessments have been completed around the US and Canada. So this technology is available in other states, but usually through a hospital setting. My service is a little unique in that the driver, the family that's worrying, they don't need a doctor's referral. They can self-refer, and I don't send the results to the DMV, and the driver has complete control. So if I have lots of clients who call me from other states and say, we've got nothing like this where we live. I'll then do some research for them and find out if Drive Able is in their area. And if not, I'll then connect them with a driver rehabilitation professional that will be able to do a cognitive assessment and a physical and vision assessment. My focus is purely on the mental abilities needed for safe driving. So I'd like to be a resource, and I am a member of the National Aging in Place Council, and I know that you two are actively involved as well. And there's a book that's just been released talking about difficult aging in place conversations. It was sponsored by the National Aging in Place Council, and their website is ageinplace.org. And if you go onto Amazon, you can download it. Kindle or ebook version, or you can purchase a book as well. So that's a wonderful resource because there are over 20 co-authors that contributed about everything to do with aging in place, every kind of topic you could think of. And I was a contributor and welcomed that opportunity. And so mine is all about driving concerns and what you need to be looking out for, and warning signs, and how to have the conversation.
Yeah, and we'll put that link in the description, the video description, so people can be able to find it. You had also shared some statistics and some information about seniors, the numbers of seniors who may be having challenges of different types, I believe. Could you just talk a little bit more about how big of a challenge this is?
Yeah. So there was a study done back in early 2000, and I'm pretty sure the figures haven't changed much, but most adult children would rather talk to mum or dad about funeral plans than talk about their driving worries. And so it's a really hot button topic. It really upsets a lot of drivers and creates a lot of conflict and tension in families. But yeah, some of the statistics, the Gallup there was a Gallup poll done 2018, and they found that about 83% of US adults drive several times a week. 45% of adults over the age of 65 are driving daily. And during the pandemic, the year 2020, AAA did a survey, and they found that there'd been a surge in risky driving behaviours. There was more speeding, more DUIs, more people running red lights, and less seatbelt use. And so even though during the pandemic people were driving fewer miles, fatal crashes had risen just over 6.8%. And so what they learned through that time is that they talked about the psychology of driving. We take our cues about what's acceptable from the drivers around us. And in 2021, NHTSA, which is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA for short, that 15% of all crashes and 9% of fatal crashes involve being distracted. And so one of the big takeaways from a conference I just came back from, the driver rehabilitation conference, was that pandemic cell phone use has increased, and they think that that's tied in with how we were all isolated and had the stay-at-home orders. We all started to really rely on Zoom and on our cell phones, and then that kind of transferred to the car. But it really is a manual and cognitive task. And so there've been some studies recently that the more complex and the longer your phone call is while you're driving, even on hands-free, the greater the risk, and the risk rose again if you were the one that was making an outgoing call. So how does this then, I guess, more facts about how this all ties in with older adults. We know that in 7 years' time, in 2030, 1 of every 5 drivers in America will be 65 years or older. And it's just staggering numbers to me. That equals some 44 million drivers. And we know that drivers age 70 plus, they're keeping their licenses for longer, but they're driving fewer miles. But we also know that when someone reaches 75, they have a per mile fatality. If they have a crash, they're more likely to be more susceptible to injury, especially chest injuries and medical complications. And that's because as we age, our bodies are not as resilient as we're, a 25-year-old that has a collision. It's not related to having more crashes. But what happens is if the person's 85 years plus, their per mile fatality is 9 times as great as a driver 25 to 69. And then the more at risk the driver is the one that has cognitive impairment. They are 3 times more likely to cause an at-fault collision. And so when I dug a little deeper with this, the Alzheimer's Association reports that we have 5.8 million Americans living with dementia, and they estimate that 30 to 40% are still driving. So when you break down these
30 or 40% are still driving?
Still driving. And we don't know, like the physicians will be based on the symptoms, right, and what's reported, and they will be able to say where that person is in terms of the progression of the disease, whether they're early onset or they're middle stages. Definitely by middle stages of dementia, and dementia is that umbrella term, and Alzheimer's is one of the dementias, and there's over 200 of them. So the challenge is that by the time the person's at the middle stage, they should really, even with Parkinson's and some of the other diseases, no longer be driving. But it's the people that are still in those early stages that are still driving, and you don't know at what point they're not safe. And so when I was looking at these figures from the Alzheimer's Association, it equated to something like 1.74 million to 2.32 million individuals who are driving with dementia in this country. And so we really need like assessment services that can help families and drivers figure out, is the person still safe to drive? And then the other thing about the fatalities with people aged 65 and older is that according to NHTSA in 2018, they made up 19% of all traffic fatalities. There were over 6,000 6,907 people, sorry, my phone, 6,907 people that were killed. And what was really concerning to me was that those fatal crashes occurred during daylight hours, on weekdays, and involved multiple vehicles. And, another interesting fact here is that, and I had only just learned about this group, they're called the Storefront Safety Council Initiative. They've been tracking data for the last decade or so about all of the storefront crashes. And every day they estimate that there's over 100 crashes into buildings, 16,000 people are injured every year, and 2,600 die. And there's a really easy fix to that by installing the bollards, which are those concrete pylons. They're about 4 foot high. If they were put in front of all of the stores that had glass, like Trader Joe's and the dollar store and UPS. We just had the UPS store in the town where I live in Pleasanton. They just had someone have pedal confusion and they crashed through their glass front earlier over the summer. So the statistics are pretty concerning for sure.
Yeah, there was a storefront crash at Trader Joe's in Casper Valley about 3 or 4 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, and I think over a dozen people were hurt. And it appeared to be an older driver who had pedal confusion or some kind of confusion.
Yeah, and as a community, we can all do something about that. We can all lobby our city departments to bring this to their attention and really encourage having bollards installed. And the other worry for me is the restaurants that are out on the street. In downtown Pleasanton, we close off our street for some of the summertime, and when somebody has pedal confusion, that's because their brain has become cognitively loaded, and you don't know what skill's going to be lost, but the car is still going to be moving forward. And so it really is a community safety issue.
Yeah. So can you describe for us a little bit about exactly what your service is, how, what you go about, and how you end up sharing the results with the driver, family, any other parties that, may or should be involved?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as I said earlier, a lot of families will find me on Google or they'll hear about me word of mouth. I also accept referrals from physicians, and when it's that kind of a referral process, then the physician gets a copy of the report. So what happens is either the family or the driver, if they have concerns that they're starting to see changes in themselves, they'll call, we'll go over what's involved in the assessment, we'll schedule the assessment, and the assessment is presented on a digital tablet on a stand. It's an iPad. It's testing for attention, shifting of attention, memory, peripheral, reaction times, and it's a very specific assessment that is looking at the interaction of the mental abilities needed for safe driving. So it's different to when a person goes to the physician and they have a generalized cognitive assessment, or they have the mini mental exam, or the MoCA, which is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, which only takes 10 minutes. This first portion can take anywhere from 25 minutes to an hour, sometimes a little longer if the person has a more progressive stage of cognitive impairment. And that portion of it is essentially predicting how will they do on the road. And then the person has a break. We want them to be relaxed and refreshed, and they're here at our office, and that can be anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on what they need. Then we go out in the evaluator vehicle, and that has everyone's reassurance and safety. I have a passenger side brake and gas pedal, and that particular assessment, and all of this was built by DriveAble, who are one of the world leaders in impairment assessment technology. The second portion of the assessment, I'm looking that the the assessment, the evaluation is looking for what kind of driving errors is somebody making? Because we know that drivers with cognitive impairment, they make different driving mistakes to normal healthy drivers. So we know that left-hand turns are particularly challenging, and also depth perception, like being able to judge how far ahead is the car in front, how, when you're making that left turn, how much distance is there before I can safely make that turn. That's just one area of it. And DriveAble built a specific, specialized, functional road course that starts from the office here in Pleasanton. That's a 45-minute drive. And if I have some drivers who are no longer driving on the freeways, the route has been adjusted to still do the assessment. And it's an amazing piece of technology, because as we're driving, I am recording on another iPad what those errors are, whether they're low or high risk. And then what happens is that data from the first and the second portion are compiled into the DriveAble system, and it then will produce a report anywhere from 3 to 5 pages, and it is in color. The family and the driver get a copy of this, but what's wonderful about it is it shows the cognitive processes that were assessed, how the person performed, because this whole assessment process is standardized, it's based on science and research, it's age normed, which means that the results are compared to another driver that's the same age. And so the whole goal of this is to protect the good, safe drivers and identify the folks that need to be transitioning to the passenger seat, because we know that just because you're 87 or 92, or if you have congestive heart failure or even early Alzheimer's, doesn't necessarily mean you're an unsafe driver. The challenge is in knowing when to stop, and so gives a lot of information. There's even a map on the report that shows where that person maybe made the driving error. And I have a lot of families who really appreciate being able to keep this conversation and this decision-making time in their family. You know, they have a good relationship with mum or dad, and they really want to be able to, you know, manage that in a respectful way and have, you know, an impartial, accurate and fair assessment process. So that's pretty much how that happens. So when the driver comes in, they have already pre-filled ahead of time a number of forms, and so I know very clearly who's allowed to get a copy and who's not. We of course follow HIPAA, and they can ask for how many copies they want, and that's pretty much how that happens. And I don't report to the DMV.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, as a neutral third party, it kind of makes the conversation a little easier. I mean, in my case, for my parents, my mom's got dementia, and she's been a horrible driver her whole life. So it was kind of difficult to tell what the problem was. But you know, in her case, it was more forgetting where she was going, which would make her even more nervous. And then we started to realize, hey, you know, my dad's case, it was physical ability, you know, so, and realizing that. But having that conversation, like, it was much easier to get my mom to stop driving than my dad. And having that conversation and having that third party assessment, it's not like, you know, your child coming in and saying, we're taking the keys.
Yes.
Oh, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's all about, you know, respecting the driving experience that your parent had at one point, but also recognizing that things are starting to change. And it all changes for us at some point in time. And so the nice thing is that I can, you know, pull in my case management skills, and I help many, many families. It's part of my service. There's no additional fees for this. I help families have that conversation, and we can either do it at the office, they can come back. But now with Zoom, I can do Zoom video meetings, we can do it on the phone. and I explain the results, and then we talk about what are the next steps depending on where they fall in terms of that risk spectrum. So it is really hard for the driver because, as they get older, they're trying to hang on to control because feel like they're losing their independence. And so when you say this is how it's going to be, it just really sets everybody off on the wrong foot. When what my number one thing, Rich, is to say is, when was the last time you were in the car with your mum or dad? And if they say, oh, I haven't driven with her for a couple of years, but I know she's not driving very well. Well, my reply is, well, go for a ride along and see how they're doing, and drive to all of the normal places that she goes, and do it at different times of the day. And I have a free warning signs checklist. We probably don't have enough time to get through it all today, but happy to share that link. And it's a checklist, and people can, when they go out with their loved one, don't scribe off on it while you're in the car with them. Do that afterwards, and then it's got tips and strategies of how to bring up the conversation. But people can call me, families can call me anytime if you need some help with how am I going to have this talk and without creating World War III. But the first thing is go for the ride along. And also what I do ask of every person that comes in is, when did they last have a vision test? And I'm not talking about the vision eye chart as a doctor. When did they last have a full vision exam with an optometrist? Because it's estimated that when we're driving, 90% of the information that we're processing is through our eyes, and we need our eyes to be as strong and healthy as possible. And going to an optometrist, they'll also help detect if there's any other kind of medical issues like macular degeneration, or the really common one, cataracts. I had one lady who came in. She hadn't had a vision test for many, many years, did not do well during the assessment. It was a red flag to me for what I understood about what was going on for her. Turned out she had cataracts. She had the surgery, has brand new eyes. She returned for a review driving assessment. She's been cleared to drive, doing really, really well. So we've all got to take care of our eyes, even at our age. Look at me with my glasses.
Well, what I do like is your service has both those components, the kind of like in-office assessment, and then the real world, we're on the road for 30, 40, 45 minutes.
Yes.
It's not just a drive around the block. It's like, hey, you have an opportunity to do different environments and different types of activities in the car. It's very, very real world.
And the drivers really appreciate that, because they get an opportunity, right, to show what their driving skills are like. And so sometimes, if they haven't done well in the first portion, and then you're seeing some strengths then out on the road, it's all kind of a composite score. So, and they don't need to have any familiarity with the Pleasanton area. It's not like a DMV on-road test where it's all about your knowledge of the road rules. I'm not evaluating for bad habits. We all have bad habits, the more experienced that we are. So it's very specific to the cognitive abilities and looking for those red flags that are, showing that there are some concerns.
Jen, do you have any other questions or?
No, that was really the only question I had. It's just staggering, all the statistics that you were sharing with us.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yes. Yeah. And so, I really try to encourage everyone. If you have a parent that's over the age of, 75, have a baseline, because what we do know about driving skills, these are driving serves us really well as we age. It's one of those skill sets that, it doesn't tend to change really quickly. So when there are sudden changes, usually it means there's something medically going on. But I think that if you've got an older parent and they're driving, or a spouse or whoever it might be, a partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, somebody, even a grandparent, somebody that is driving and you're starting to see some of these warning signs, that's the thing, right? Being educated, being aware, hang on to that resource and just have a little look through that and go out for that ride along. But then, especially when they hit 85, because they're so much more frail, and then if you find out that they've got a cognitive impairment, or you're seeing these the warning signs checklist that I share, it's really detailed in terms of what to be looking out for. Then we typically say, if you're seeing a pattern, like if you don't see any warning signs when you go out with your loved one, then all is okay for a while. Repeat it in a couple of months. But if you're seeing, if you're checking off 3 or 4 or 5 warning signs, then try and repeat that ride along before you leave, before you get back on that flight to go back to the East Coast. Say you live out of town. Do it at a different time.
And that exactly, I think, is key, because if you're an out-of-town adult child who only sees your parent twice a year, once a year, you really do need to do that kind of check-in.
Yes. And do it before you leave, and do it at a different time of the day, because, the parent may be driving at different times of the day. We really don't know. But most drivers, for the most part, will limit their own driving. They won't drive at night.
Yep.
They won't drive at dusk or dawn, and they won't drive in the rain or the freeways. But it's the driver with cognitive impairment. They lose that capacity for self-reflection and insight. They're no longer aware that their driving is an issue. They truly, truly believe that they're still a good, safe driver. And the other thing about driving is that when you ask someone, how's your driving, most of us will think about it in a past tense. Oh, I've been a great driver. I've been driving for 50 years and I've never had an accident. Instead of thinking about, no, what's your driving right now?
Your current skill set.
We tend to think, a lot of people tend to think more in the past. And so my takeaway for families is really try and come from a place of love and compassion. Don't delegate the most authoritative person in the family, the one that's the most outspoken, the one that's the most bombastic. Do not ask them to bring up this topic and talk to mum about it. We need to get an assessment. We need this. We need that. You're going to do this. That's not the way to handle this. Save those kind of skills for enforcing any driving decisions that you all decide as a family. Really coming from that place of love and care and compassion, because most older drivers, they don't want to upset their families, but at the same time, they're trying to hang on to what they feel is this last piece of independence.
It's independence. Yep.
But they also don't want to be responsible for causing a fatality or a collision, so it really is a balancing act.
Yep. Well, Melanie, thank you so much for, doing this and sharing a little bit about this. This is, it's as I mentioned, an issue that is so common with seniors and their adult children who are trying to navigate all of this. And actually, until I met you like 6-9 months ago, I didn't even know this service was really out there. So I'm glad you're sharing it and letting us know about it. We will put all your contact information and some of that other stuff you mentioned in the video description below, and your contact information. And once again, thank you for doing it, and have a good day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rich. Bye, Jen.
Bye.
Have a wonderful day. Be safe.